press and public on request. This meeting will not be broadcast live, however, a recording will be made available as soon as possible after the meeting is concluded. We welcome the use of Welsh language at meetings. I have had no requests for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. Please can members attending via Microsoft Teams refrain from using the chat function and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you want to speak. Please remember to keep your microphone muted when you're not talking. Moving on to the agenda item welcome and apologies. Jade, do we have any apologies, please?
Thanks, Chair. I haven't received any apologies today, but Councillor Byrne is having technical difficulties.
Okay. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Jade, could you please ask members in alphabetical order to state whether they have any interest to declare?
Of course. We'll start with Councillor Ashley.
None that I'm aware of, thank you.
Councillor Byrne is not here. Councillor Davis doesn't seem to be here. Councillor Jones?
None that I'm aware of.
Thank you. Mr. Callagher?
Yes, I have a small pension from Torvine.
Thank you. In yourself, Chair?
My husband's receiving a pension from Torvine.
Chair, can I come back in, Chair? Delys, I pay into the Torvine Councillors Pension Scheme. Do I need to declare that?
Yeah, it's not a necessary requirement to declare that. It's only if you, because the items on the agenda are fairly general. So, but if you enter into a debate or ask a specific question, perhaps which relates to that in particular, then you can consider declaring it at the time. But it's, you know, if members still wish to declare that's a matter for them. But you know, it isn't an absolute necessity.
Thank you.
I must admit, I've never thought of it. I've got a graduated pension, which is part of our pension scheme as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rees?
Given that, that it is on the agenda about pensions, I've got a very, very small Torvine Council pension, but I don't think it'll impact on anything that we're discussing.
Thank you. And Councillor Williams?
Yes, as with others, I'm in receipt of a pension and pay into a pension.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Agenda item 3 is the minutes of Governance and Audit Committee from the 14th of June this year. Members, please could you state whether you have anything to raise in relation to the minutes? If not, I will take them as agreed. I see no raised hands, so I'll take them as agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 4 is the action sheet. There were no actions raised in relation to the previous meeting. Please could you state whether you have anything to raise in relation to the action sheet? If not, we can note its contents. I can see no hands raised. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5, which is the Audit of Accounts Report, Torvine County Borough Council. I think it's Alice King from Audit Wales. Please could you present your report to us?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. So I'm here today to present to you the audit report for the 22-23 financial year following the successful completion of our audit work. I'm going to presume that all members have had a chance to read our report in advance, and therefore I'll take you through the key elements of the report, but I welcome any questions at the end of my presentation. So to start with, I'm going to go to page 18 of your report packs with our introduction. I'm just going to remind members here that we don't audit to give complete assurance, but we are working to a level of materiality. Now, I have to make an apology. There is a typo in this report. So paragraph 4 should read 3.9 million instead of 3.6 million. I've got a corrected version of this report that I will circulate after the end of this meeting, so apologies for that small mistake. So that is our general level of materiality. We then have some other areas where we pay specific attention, and we set a slightly lower level of materiality here. So that includes senior officers' remuneration and related party transactions. Moving on then to the next page in our report, and I guess the headline that you'll all want to hear is that we will be issuing a unqualified audit opinion for this year for the 2022-23 accounts, based on you providing us with a letter of representation that I know is coming later on in this agenda. So that's really great news this year for yourselves, and a very high quality set of accounts again from your finance team. So as always, there are some misstatements that we identify through our work. So we have one uncorrected misstatement that is above our trivial reporting level of materiality, which is documented at paragraph 11. So this is quite a technical uncorrected misstatement involving a adjustment that's made between two of your unusable reserves. The council have acknowledged this as an error and are looking to correct this going forward for future financial years. I believe there was an issue with the way the financial ledger was addressing those adjustments, but we have satisfied ourselves that this is not material to your accounts and therefore can be left uncorrected. We've also identified a number of misstatements that have been corrected by your officers. I won't take you through these individually. They are held at Appendix 3 to our report, but of course I'm happy to take any questions if any members have any questions on the specifics included in that appendix. So finally, I'd just like to pay my thanks to Dave Lilly and Sharon Dixon and the rest of the team. I came into the audit as manager halfway through the process, and they made it very easy for me to work with them and the rest of the team. We also did this audit in quite a short space of time for various reasons, and they were able to deal with quite a large audit team this year well. So I'd just like to pay my thanks to Dave and everyone at the finance team. Of course, there's areas we'll want to make improvements for next year. There always is, some efficiencies and ways of working that we'd like to discuss. So I know Dave and I are planning to have a PPL session once the accounts have been signed by the Auditor General. So the Auditor General will be due to sign after your full council meeting. So the Auditor General date for signing is the 26th of October, so next week. So thank you, Chair. That's all I wanted to say on this report, but I'm happy to take any questions from anyone on anything that I've spoken about.
Thank you very much, and thank you for joining us, and I'm glad that they made your joining welcome. Has anybody got any questions? I've got one question, and it's purely my ignorance of accounts as such. It's on page 29.
Yeah.
And in these tables, some of the items are marked as disclosure and some are not. Can I assume that the disclosure is when you've queried something and you've had an answer back, or is there a different meaning?
Could you give me a specific, just so I can make sure I answer you correctly? Let me see if I can. Is there one in particular, Chair, that you wanted some clarification on?
Not in particular, but like the long-term liabilities of 555, that's not marked as a disclosure, but the next item, financial instruments, are marked as a disclosure. What is the difference?
So sometimes the error is purely an error on the face of the account, as it were, on the document itself, but the supporting records are fine. So we would, in that case, just reference that it's a disclosure issue only. Otherwise, there are sometimes errors with the working papers supporting that, and they're not marked to disclosure here. So I think that's why we've marked those differently, just it's different elements of the accounts and where the errors have been identified. In all cases, though, just to put your mind at rest, we've had responses and corrections with supporting working papers to update those corrections with all of the amendments in this table.
Thank you very much. Councillor Williams, you've got a question.
Thank you, Chair. It's in a similar vein to yourself, really. It's the one above it, the long-term liabilities. Movement of Section 106 balances from other short-term creditors into long-term liabilities. Is this a change in accounting practice? Is that what we're going to see going forward? It's sort of, what's the explanation behind that a little, really?
Yeah, so I'm happy to explain this one. This treatment of your Section 106 balances is prescribed in the Local Government Code of Accounting as has to sit into long-term liabilities as a receipt in advance. due to the nature of how we conduct our audit work, we won't have selected this necessarily in the past, a specific Section 106 transaction for testing. And so we haven't picked up on this error previously. So it's because this came up in our sample this year, we identified the incorrect accounting treatment. We're able to point your finance team to the code and they were happy to make the correction in line with that accounting treatment. So it's purely just we might not have selected it for testing previously, and now we've corrected the accounts with your finance team.
Thank you. So I assume then it will always be done correctly.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah.
Councillor, yes, it will.
I think the consensus is yes. Thank you. Thank you for those explanations. Much appreciated. I see no other hands raised. Oh, sorry.
If there's no other questions, I'd just like to say that, from the authority's point of view, we'd also like to thank, Alice has obviously been very complimentary to Dave and Sharon and the quality of the accounts, but Alice has also tried to make her joining as seamless as possible and has been very supportive of the authority. So I think we would like to recognise Audit Wales in putting Alice in, and Alice and the work she's done. And we've come forward from last year, and I know collectively we want to work to get back to where we used to be in terms of early close down. I still think we're going to be first in Wales to sign if it all goes to plan in October next week.
I'd have to check the Auditor General's diary to make sure there's no one before you, but I certainly think you're in the first one or two, Nigel.
But I think it's worth the committee just recognising the contribution Alice has made in a short space of time to bring the audit to a good and satisfactory conclusion.
Thank you. Councillor Ashley, your hand is raised.
I was going to say, we note that, Nigel. And thank you, everybody, for the contributions.
Thank you. We're obviously looking for a gold star here, aren't we?
I think they want a certificate as well. Well done, everybody.
Yes, well done, everybody. It's much appreciated, and it's good to know that things are on track. Thank you. Right. If there are no more questions, we'll accept this report as being read. Thank you. Thank you, Alice.
Thanks, Chair.
And then we can move on to agenda item 6, the statement of accounts. So Lily, please, Director of Finance Services, can you present your report for us?
Thank you, Chair. This follows on from Alice's presentation on the findings of the audit. So this report and its appendices present to you, as those charged with governance, the final statement of accounts for 22-23 for review, with the statement of accounts being scheduled to be presented to full council next week for consideration and approval for onward signing to the Auditor General, as Alice has said, on the 26th of October. So the statement is attached. Also attached for your information and review is the responses that we have made as an authority to the Audit Wales as those charged with governance in respect of certain questions. It's a lot more detailed than it was previous years because Audit Wales have this year been working to a different auditing standard, a much more prescribed audit standard, which is causes a little bit of pain. They have evolved their audit process as they've gone through the audit process. And then the final point in the report is that as attached as the appendix is the draft letter of representation, which again we're looking for authorisation to forward that on to council for submission to council for signing by Chair and Nigel going forward. So, as Nigel has said, Alice came into the process during the audit going on, and she provided a lot of clarity to the process and allowed us to get to the position we are in today. And hopefully for next week when we consider it a council. That's all I was going to say, Chair. And I'm available for questions, and so is Sharon and Chris are behind me. They'll take the hard technical ones.
Thank you. It's open to questions. Does anybody have any questions with regard to this report? Councillor Williams? Sorry. Go on. Come to you now, Mr. Okay.
I'm presuming, David, you're happy to take questions on the accounts themselves, the body of the appendix and stuff. Yeah. Just to seek clarification, but I'll let my colleague come in first. Can I just make an observation in reading through this? It did strike me when the questionnaire was, as you say, a much more detailed questionnaire, that potentially is there a question of maybe a little bit of training around fraud and other matters that this committee could have as part of their sort of training and awareness going forward in the next year? Just a question.
I think that's something we'll consider, Chair. Yeah.
I will come back with some other questions in a minute.
Thanks, Chair. Appendix 1 of your report, Inquiries of Management, on question 7, statement 7 on page 34, and then a number of bullet points going on to page 35. The very last bullet point, and forgive my ignorance, I just wanted a little bit of explanation there. Says that the pension fund is increasingly investing in non-publicly listed investments that require a degree of estimation in determining their value. I just wondered if you could give us a little bit more detail of what that actually means. Okay.
You said item 7.
Okay.
It's page 35. It's the last bullet point before point 8.
That's right, yes. I'm sorry, I wasn't. Couldn't explain exactly where it was. Bottom of page 35.
It's appendix 1, bullet point 7. It's the last point 7. It's the last bullet point.
Okay, because obviously I honestly don't know what non-publicly listed investments are, and I just wondered when you say this, you have to estimate their value, just a little bit more detail around that. Thank you. Yeah.
Are there any other questions? I have a question. It's probably on the terminology, sorry. I'm on page 52, the narrative report. On the third chapter, underneath the basis of preparation and presentation, the council services will continue to be delivered by the public sector. Therefore, the accounts are prepared on an ongoing concern basis. The level of usable reserves, 33.3 million, is sufficient to meet the short-term cost of the provision of services over the medium term. Is it short-term or is it medium-term? I was a bit confused.
It's short-term. What it's referring to is the ongoing costs of providing those services. So every year we produce medium-term financial plans going forward. So we've currently got a 4-year planning from 24-25 through 4 years. That estimates our pressures and our anticipated forecasts of our revenue performance, so the cost of delivering our day-to-day services at the moment. So where we refer to saying short term there, we're talking about the revenue costs of delivering the services. So there's the revenue costs of provision of services. Some clumsy words, they'll be amended for next year.
Doesn't take much to confuse me with accounts, sorry. And on page 59, something else you can explain easily, I'm sure. We've got original budget and working budget. What is the difference?
So the original budget. Original budget is the budget that was approved by council in February 22. March 22. What we do then, so we freeze that budget, and then during the year, the council gets additional funding via external grants, specific grants, or pressures arise within services. So environments are undertaken then between individual services, individual budget lines, to recognise and correct those pressures. Those environments and additional funding or recognition of additional funding is actioned in the working budget. So the working budget is the most up-to-date budget as we progress through the year. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. So at the bottom line, the net cost of the services remains the same. So you're just moving it about within different budgets. On the net cost of services,
yes,
remains the same, whether
yes,
it's working or original.
Yeah. So
you move it from one pocket to the other.
From one budget line to another budget line. Yeah. If it's a environment between budget lines, if we get extra money in from West Government for, say, meals or initiative or an initiative that is funding a revenue activity, we recognise the income, but we also recognise the costs as a net nil.
Okay, thank you for that one. Okay. I've got another one on page 273. This is the penalties of having a layperson as a chairperson who doesn't really do deep budgets. On the bottom of the page, what's the difference between a usable and unusable reserves?
Okay, so a usable reserve is a savings pot. So they are monies that have been underspent, budgets that have been underspent in years, and we put them into savings so they can be used for purposes. So there's the general fund balance, that's a general pot, a savings pot for the authority, and then we have specific reserves for service areas. So where services underspent in the past, we've put money into those service areas to allow them to manage their financial pressures over multiple years, or undertake change activities and fund them from their own reserves. We've also then got specific corporate reserves. So we self-fund part of our insurance cover. So our excess cover, we fund ourselves. So that is a usable reserve that we got in as a corporate reserve. So they are usable reserves, so they can be used for purposes. Unusable reserves are entries that have occurred through recognition of either static or accounting practice or accounting standards. And they're basically just accounting entries in the statements so that the statements themselves comply with accounting standards, so we can compare ourselves between other local authority bodies, other public sector bodies, but those reserves are not usable in any way. So an example in there is an accumulated absence reserve. So we have to recognise in the accounts the levels of annual leave that haven't been taken in a year, and provide an estimated cost and recognise that in. So that goes into the services, but then is reversed out into this yeah.
Thank you very much, and thank you for explaining this
Okay.
in a way I can understand. Thanks. Has anybody else got any other questions? Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, if I may, and a similar lines to the chair, really. So, firstly, on page 58, you've outlined reasons for the outturn position being better than expected. So I was just curious of the last one there, the generally lower spend on non-employee operational budgets. I guess it was sort of, is that reflect perhaps there was less demand for services, which I think is probably unlikely. Less travel, is that perhaps something in terms of we didn't have so many people in the building, we didn't have as many costs? It was really trying to understand that a little, Dave. So my assumptions were about right. That's fine.
Sorry. Yeah, it's the general running costs of the authority. So changing working practices of operations since COVID. When we set the budget, there was an assumption that we were going to move back into a more historic way of operations. They didn't really come to pass during the outcome. So yes, we've had less spend in buildings and things like that. Our supplies and services, travelling, less going on. More people working from home. So there's less need to have supplies and services cupboards and things like that, which were prolific around the authority in the past. And there's general underspends on activities that weren't taken forward as quickly as possible, or were done in a more efficient, a cheaper way.
No, thank you. If I may, just while on this page or this area, I know somebody's waiting to come in, but the other point, which was on the next page, on page 59, following on from the chair's point, the one that was of interest really was the finance other, because obviously significant original budget figure. The working budget figure was a lot less, and the actual spend was a lot less. So it was kind of. I can understand perhaps in some of the service areas some of the rationale for why there was less spend, but in your particular area it was, I was curious.
Sorry. When we set the budget, we had a pay contingency. That wasn't allocated to services because we didn't know where it was going to be, or what it was going to be, and the impact it was going to have on each of the service areas. That was held in finance other. So what we did then, we varied it out from the original budget to the service lines to give us our working budget and recognise it there. So.
Thank you for that helpful explanation.
Thank you. Councillor Ashley, you have a question?
Yeah, just very quickly, because obviously this is historical accounts, but is this going to be something? The question that David raised, is this something that's going to go and happen in the future? Obviously, we've got pressures coming at us. Is this a trend, or is this with inflation coming at us? Is that going to change the situation? I only ask that because we obviously got this year's settlement coming at us soon.
Which way do I look? Either way. Yes, Councillor Ashley, it is. What we've done as part of the programme of work that we've been undertaking to address the forecasted shortfall in 24-25, we did a forensic review of the 22-23 outturn position. So we then went back and challenged all chief officers and strategic directors, heads of service on the underspends on specific lines. So what you will see in Scrutiny Committee on the 14th of November is that we have already top sliced these budgets by elements of the underspend to give us a revised budget position to start 24-25 with.
Are we going to have enough detail to look at that? I mean, obviously, this picture and last year is going to tell us. You see, I'm getting a bit wised up to this, and I think Mrs. Pennington's answer, but I'm not particularly account-wise, but I can see a trend when I know a trend when I see it.
it also links into Councillor Williams' question. You know,
yes,
the underspend on non-employee.
Thank you.
But obviously, we're being very prudent indeed with accommodation, aren't we?
Thank you, Councillor Ashley. Mr.
Yeah,
Rees,
no, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. That's very helpful.
Mr. Rees, you have a question?
Yeah, but it's slightly different to what we're talking about now. So if you want to, if your question is about this,
question relevant?
It's in this general area, I suppose. Yeah. It was really following on a bit of this line of questioning, really, Dave. On page 60-61, there's a breakdown, obviously, of slippage around capital spend. So I was just looking at, are we confident that we'll be using that slippage around capital? You described the revenue position, obviously, quite effectively, but it was what confidence we have in terms of the capital slippage. Obviously, you can't be precise. You know, a lot of things out of control. But
yeah. So, obviously, capital, we concentrate on capital on much larger schemes. So, if there is a delay on a particular scheme, it has a bigger effect on it. So, we are taking, we are reviewing our capital programme in a little bit more vigour than we have done in previous years, given the size of the slippage there. There is going to be a slippage in 23-24 because we have a couple of schemes which have been delayed. And they've been delayed because we've seen inflationary pressures. So we've been working those figures to either bring them in within the funding envelopes that we have approved, or we can go back to Welsh Government to seek additional support from them to support us in that. So I'm thinking the 21st Century Schools, the Maindy project, initially came in. It was over the amount of money that we had aligned to the project. We've done a lot of work internally with officers and with the approved contractor to analyse that, reduce that down, but that has caused delays. So that is going to, the spend profile is going to slip into future years. Another one is going to be, we had an item in there for in this year's programme of an unallocated amount which has now been approved into the farm to add to the money that we had in the farm in the first place. Obviously, we're not going to spend all of the money on the farm in this financial year. There will be slippage into next year. So it's more of a moving feast, and it's more easily influenced by outside factors. But we are keeping a close eye on it. The PMO is also the Project Management Office, PMO, is also keeping a close eye on it. And all of this is also reported in the leadership team on a regular basis as well. So there's a more forensic oversight of it. There has been in the past, but there will still be slippage. But I'm hopeful it won't be as large as a percentage of the overall programme.
No, that's
Chair,
sorry, that's helpful, and obviously that's important. So we look at the budget consideration for next year. That's part of the reason for the question.
Chair, I'm going to have to make a declaration here.
Okay, Councillor Ashley.
I'm both the ward councillor and a governor of Maindy School, it was mentioned. I'm also a shadow board chair for what that's worth of the farm. They were all mentioned.
Okay, thank you. We'll note that.
Can I just make a very quick comment as well, if I may?
Yes, go on.
David and I follow each other around on these comments, and I noted the capital stuff as well. It's a very interesting development. I don't know whether that's going to come up at budget as well, because obviously this is last year, but it's interesting. The other aspect of it, and that's why I'm being careful what I say about Maindy School, the budget there has also changed aspects of the design of the school, because I say that, David, you probably tell me off on this, but because of budget, that certain aspects of that design have to be changed. That was worrying, I thought.
That's what we're talking here, Councillor Ashley, is the principal programme. We're not talking about individuals' decisions. So I think what you've got the discussions we are going to have on budget you cannot conflate revenue and capital.
No, I appreciate that.
In one discussion, they are two separate beasts. So when we go to scrutiny in November, that is going to be on the revenue budget. It will not cover the capital budget. The capital budget is experiencing pressures, and the future capital programme is experiencing pressures. So the authority is going to have to consider where and select where its capital very limited capital resources are allocated and used. But that's a future debate for Cabinet and Council as we work through. But you know, the individual discussions on schemes, you know, that's not for here.
All I was going to say was it makes it intelligible for members when we do, because that's the sort of thing it's like to be raised. Because if you've got a big flagship scheme goes in and then the capital gets less, there's obviously problems there. That's only observation I was making there.
Thank you for your observations, Councillor Ashby.
Yeah.
But I think it's outside the remit of accepting this.
Oh, no, I think you're right to point that out to me, but it is a problem. And I think our officers managed this extremely well, and that's what I was other thing I was going to say. It's not an easy ask on their part.
No, I know. Can we just move on, because Mr. Rees has got a question with regards
to... sorry about that. Yeah, I'll get out of that one.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rees.
Thanks. Tracking back a bit, going back to the section that talks about inquiries of management in relation to fraud. On page 41, there's a question there. What is management's communication, if any, to employees regarding their views on business practice and ethical behaviour? And the statement is that all council policies are on the intranet. Any changes go out via email, and the code of conduct process is there in place. I just wondered whether is there any time where staff are specifically asked what their views of the council's business practices are and its ethical behaviour? For example, perhaps in some kind of staff survey, whether that takes place every year or couple of years or whatever.
Peter, can you answer this question, please?
I don't specifically ask anybody about that, you know. I mean, in terms of if people got any concerns about fraud or whistleblowing, you know, there's a trodden path which people know which way to come, like, you know what I mean. And I get referred as either anonymously or anonymously, but you know, I don't go looking for, you know what I mean, have you got an issue with that? Staff survey, I don't think we've had them for a few years, but I think they probably did. They did sort of tease up any questions on those areas when we have had a staff survey, but I'm not quite sure the last one we had. But I certainly don't go looking for those individual questions. But believe you me, they know where I am if they've got any issues to bring to my attention.
I'm just putting it out there that you know, there's a question, you know, what is management's communication regarding the views of staff, and we're not really asking that, so we don't know what staff's views are. I wouldn't be surprised if everything is all proper and above board and that there's no issue at all, but I'm just putting it out there as something possibly to consider.
Yeah. So the other context is those questions are in relation to a category that says inquiries in relation to fraud. That's where I come in, so that's why I put the fraud angle on in terms of sort of, I know it's probably teeing up unacceptable business practices that should be brought to my attention, and none of those have been brought to my attention in recent years.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Williams, your hand's raised.
Yes, thank you. That was behind why I asked this question about fraud training for this committee as perhaps a step in relation to that. I've only got a couple of little points, if I may, and you'll be pleased and I'll cease. On page 61, you've talked about the revaluing assets. And I was interested to see Llanrhaven Manor among those, which I should be interested given it's in my ward. And then in the detail of the report on page 109, it gives a valuation of 365,000. So my question really is, how are the valuations done? Who does them? And particularly, I suppose, with those heritage assets, which are notoriously difficult to value, I would imagine.
I'm going to have to go back to school, aren't I? I will have to go on a training session. Our asset team value them in line with their RICS standards to come through. On the cyclical ones, where we look at and adjust for inflationary increases, I think you were all on the committee last year when we considered last year's statement, and there was a weakness identified with general inflation running high on rent. So that we recognise those changes now through the use of indices applied to held values within the balance sheet. Is that okay? Yeah.
Thank you for that. And if I may, is it helpful to do my other couple of questions at the same time? Yeah. This is on page 63, where obviously you've done you've assumed pay award from 23-24 at 3% and anticipated pay-related pressure. So do you do a level of modelling? Should it be higher or lower? That was the first question.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I think I'll leave it at that.
Get in there. Yes, we do model. We do model our pay assumptions, and we do keep a close eye on negotiations, and we keep a close contact as well with other local authorities to see where they are, to ensure that we are thereabouts within assumptions. Obviously, we could put a much higher pay assumption in, but we still got to you'll have to start to fund that because we're not going to get extra money. It just creates a pressure. So, this was considered when we struck this medium-term financial plan. It was a robust estimate based on all factors going on. But as you said, Councillor Williams, we do monitor it and we do adjust going forward.
Thank you for that. Right, if there are no more questions or queries, thank you for answering all our queries, of which we've beaten you up a bit, I think.
It's lovely to be asked questions, to be honest with you.
Oh, it keeps you on your toes. The recommendations, members, are on page 32 of the agenda. Please can you state if you're against the recommendations or wish to abstain? Otherwise, I'll take the report as being agreed. Right, everybody's agreed. Thank you. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 7, the mid-year prudential indicators and treasury management monitoring report. Sharon Dixon, Group Finance Officer, Corporate, please, could you present the report for us?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. It seems that this is all about us at the minute, Dave. Makes us feel quite special. So within Treasury Management, things have changed quite dramatically and over a relatively short space of time. With the Bank of England trying to control inflation and using interest rates to do this, we are quite limited in our approach to Treasury Management. Higher interest rates on the one hand gives us the opportunity to invest surplus balances at elevated rates, which in turn boosts our investment returns. So we are earning quite a lot of money on our investments at the moment. And this is a good thing, and we have earned an average rate of 4.5% in interest up to the 31st of August, compared with 2.2% in 22-23. But the flip side of this is borrowing becomes more expensive. And whilst it's recognised that the Council has a borrowing requirement, as capital investments have for quite some time been funded by our own surplus cash balances, we don't feel now is the time to lock into long-term borrowing. Our current strategy is to fund any short-term cash requirements with temporary borrowing, which is the cheaper option, as we only incur interest for the period of that borrowing. It is considered prudent to follow this policy until rates start to fall, which is estimated to be as early as mid-24. We continue to work on capital projects such as the 21st Century Schools Band B projects and the construction of the 3G pitch at Gwynflew, but the delay in reprofiling of these has impacted on our capital funding requirement or our need to borrow. We continue to work operationally within the limit set and always consider the impact of any investments or borrowing for the Council. We are constantly monitoring our options and will continue to do so throughout the remainder of this financial year and beyond. Decisions will be made at the most advantageous time. So that, in a nutshell, is the report, but I will take any questions. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Have we got any questions with regard to this report, please? I see no hands raised. There are no questions. I think you've got off lightly. Thank you. So, members, if there are no questions, the recommendations are on page 143 of the agenda. Please can you state if you're against the recommendations or wish to abstain? Otherwise, I will take them as agreed and reviewed. Okay, we're all in agreement. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 8, which is the update report, action plan for governance and improvement. Catherine Joseph, Senior Corporate Improvement. Oh, it's you, sorry. You don't look like Catherine, sorry. Please can you give your report?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. The report I'm presenting today is your 6-monthly update report on the Action Plan for Governance and Improvement. The report presented provides an update on the progress made delivering actions associated with the external audit work under the portfolio of this committee, set out in Appendix 1. As noted in 4.1 of the report, Appendix 1 provides an update for October 2023 on the actions this committee is continuing to monitor. Please note, where officers feel that a recommendation has now been fully actioned, a suggestion has been made to remove it from your monitor. Provided members are happy to do so, these will be moved from future monitoring. The report also includes details of new external audit reports, recommendations received by the Council, which will be addressed in line with the agreed reporting protocol agreed by this committee. Under 4.2 of this report, you will see that since the last Governance and Audit Committee in July 2023, there's been one new relevant external audit report. The national study undertaken by Audit Wales, Cracks in the Foundations Building Safety in Wales report, looks at how Welsh Government, local authorities and their key partners are implementing the requirements of the Building Safety Act 2022. Audit Wales made 8 recommendations, 4 of which are for local authorities in Wales. The report sits within the portfolio of the Council's Prosperous Overview and Scrutiny Committee. The report and its findings will therefore be referred to this committee for future monitoring. Finally, the report also includes details of any scrutiny work that has been undertaken, reviewing progress made delivering external regulators' recommendations and or proposals for improvement. Since the last report, a review of all audit recommendations has been undertaken by the Council Scrutiny Committees. Under 4.3 of the report, you can see there are a list of the audit studies that scrutiny committees are satisfied suitable progress has been made and will therefore be removed from the future monitoring. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Have we got any questions with regard to this report, please? Councillor Williams?
Not really a question, but just an observation to say that I think it was very helpful to have a breakdown, and I think it was very helpful to remove those that, if you like, have been dealt with by the scrutiny committees and take account of the scrutiny committee process, because I think that gives a validation to that process as well. So it's really an observation rather than anything else. And again, it's just going back to, I think this is page 159, which was the point that was being raised through the finance report, tackling fraud in Wales, recommendation to good anti-fraud culture and actively promote its importance, giving confidence to staff. So I think it just echoes the points that this committee has already made earlier in this meeting, and perhaps reinforces it.
Thank you. I have 3 hands raised. I'm not sure who came first. Councillor Ashley, I think you were the first one.
Just a practical thing. I don't know what Tom would like me for saying this even. It's just when I'm reading this report, it would be nice if the various scrutiny committees had a colour. I find it would be easier to read. I've come round to liking colour on these reports, Tom. Could you give them a colour? It just make it easier to read. You know where you got the block. No, I just find it fascinating where we're going with this, because in another place we looked at the idea of having a digest, and this actually adds to what the amount of work that's been done by these scrutiny committees, and obviously being one of the committee chairs on here, it just shows level of work and how we obviously as audit committee manage this work as part of the work of the council. It's absolutely fascinating. It shows the level of work that's been undertaken, especially by the officers concerned, which is Tom and his team.
Thank you. Do you need to comment?
I think I'll pick up a separate conversation with Councillor Ashley regarding the colour-coded nature of the report.
It's only a suggestion. You could ignore it if you like. It's just make this much easier to read. That's all.
Yeah, I'll pick up a conversation rather than ignore it. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Don't worry about that. It's I'm just complimenting you on a really useful piece of work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kelleher, your hand's raised.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to get some clarification on recommendation 7 under 4.2.3. Tom, I'm just wondering how the recommendations suggest that we should be working with neighbouring authorities and partners. How different is that from our current working practices?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'll have to pick up a conversation with the director responsible in order to come back to you with an answer to that. Obviously, these recommendations made by Audit Wales, it's a national report, so it's not necessarily picking up a specific issue with Torvine. So it's not saying there's an issue with Torvine, but we do need to consider them in the round. So I'll pick up a conversation with the directorate and come back to the committee with an answer, if that's okay.
That's great. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you for that. Mr. Rees, your hand's raised.
Thanks, Chair. I think I know the answer to this, but I just want it put on record. The national study, Cracks in the Foundations, I assume all that was done pre the RAC controversy.
Correct, yes. I think it was done in response to the Grenfell disaster, as opposed to as a response to the new issue.
Possibly there may be an update on that then.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Thank you. I've got a question. With regard to the action plan, can I assume that the ones that are crossed through are the items that you're going to be removing for next time?
Yeah, as long as members are satisfied that due process has been undertaken and there's no sort of feeling that anything should remain on the action plan, then they'll be taken out, yes. I think there's a little asterisk at the bottom saying that they'd be taken out.
Yeah, I was just clarifying that those are the items that you want to be taken. Otherwise, this whole table is going to just get too unruly, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that when I sort of took over control of it, I think that was one of my main ambitions, was to make sure it remained manageable.
I think we're all quite happy to have these items removed. Some of them are quite historic now, aren't they?
Very happy, Chair.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Mr. Kelleher, your hand's still raised.
Beg your pardon, Chair.
That's okay, that's fine. There was one item on page 164 that I was wondering about. The information governance, the last item there. It's suggested can now be removed, but the implementation is ongoing and should be tracked until the completion date in December 2024. Would it not be wise to leave that one there until it's been completed? Progress update of Accepted 2023.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand the rationale for taking it off, but be happy to keep it on, and I'll relay that back to the service responsible.
Just for the sake of another note, we might have another pandemic between now and then, you never know. Thank you. Are there any other questions, comments with regard to this report? Okay, members, the recommendations are on page 148 of the agenda. Please can you state if you're against the recommendations or wish to abstain? Otherwise, I'll take them all as agreed. Okay, we're all happy, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 9, complaints handling review. Christopher Corton, complaints team leader, please could you present your report?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. So I'm here today to provide an overview of the work undertaken by the complaints team during 2022-23. So as you know, Local Government and Elections Act 2021 gives the Governors and Audit Committee a new defined assurance role around complaints. So the committee is asked to review and assess the authority's ability to handle complaints effectively, making clear comments and any recommendations. So as you know, we have a central team within the authority which deals with all of the complaints and FOI requests coming into the authority. And we work with teams then to collate the feedback, information and coordinate responses. So we're working closely with the teams and service areas to analyse, review and look for any lessons learned through the process of complaints. We met previously back at the end of March and I explained there are different processes that we follow. So the two processes we have the set of regulations for social services complaints, and then for the central council service areas they are dealt with by the corporate complaints procedure. So as you'll note in the report, I've given some key information at the start, primarily that the total received during the year was 160. We had 139 at stage 1, 3 at stage 2 and 18 that came into us from the Ombudsman. That was a 73.9% increase on the previous financial year where we logged a total of 92. So during the last year, the team revised the way in which we categorise complaints, meaning that there are now more recorded as stage 1 rather than the others that they used to be noted as. So it brings it in line with the policy and also practices across other local authorities. We dealt with a total of 1,006 other contacts in addition to the complaints, and they decreased by 9.3 on the 1,109 from the previous year. We also note the compliments received, and we had 110 across the service areas during 22-23. So I just draw attention to a few of the points that are listed within the report. So as you can see, 4.3 with regards to the outcomes, that details those that were upheld, part upheld and not upheld. Majority 84 upheld, 16 part upheld and 42 not upheld. Appendix 1 provides a full breakdown of the complaints by service area and the outcomes and lessons learned for those. The stage 2 complaints, we had 2 for social services. They dealt with by independent investigators. Neither of those were upheld. We had another 2 that didn't progress as the complainants failed to engage. And 1 complaint corporately, that was for waste due and partly upheld due to communication issues. So we've noted 18 contacts come through from the Ombudsman for the year in 4.8. On their notes, they've got only 16. One of theirs had gone to them in March at the end of 2022, came into us in May, so it logged in this year's for our purposes. And there was another contact that we had that we logged that they later closed as inquiry and didn't feature on their later report that came into us afterwards. One intervention was around advice around escalation to a stage 2 for a complaint that went to stage 1 previously. So across both procedures we have a response rate time frame of 95% within the relevant time frame. Across the year we increased our compliance to 97.04. of on time. Obviously, there are times we can't meet those targets, and during those times we do liaise with the complainants and keep them updated with regards to progress and where we are with the responses for them. 4.13 gives a bit of information around benchmarking. Until recently, we haven't really been able to benchmark across the local authorities, but in April 2021, the Ombudsman set up the Complaint Standards Authority, and then we've been submitting quarterly figures to them across all local authorities, which are then published on their website. So I've given that at Appendix 3. That gives you a fairer idea then of where we are against the other local authorities. Whilst we all follow the same procedures, there are different setups in the different authorities as to how they allocate the complaints. So there are differences between us all at the moment. So they're trying to bring us all in line and all work to the same way. So Appendix 2 is the annual letter from the Ombudsman. So she's given a review of the year there, given some more details about the complaints that they have received about Torvine. So you'll note that they've recorded 16, and that's 0.17 per 1,000 residents in Torvine. So 4.14 explains we're always looking to improve how we deal with complaints. We're always looking at the intelligence that comes through and ensuring that staff are sufficiently trained. I know we did the training, as I mentioned, with yourselves. We've got some training scheduled for November with the Complaint Standards Authority from the Ombudsman's office. So we're just finalising that to take place with the various attendees across the authority. And we're trying to get some more of those sessions in as well, so that there's greater understanding and awareness across service areas. We meet regularly with heads of service. We do a monthly briefing with heads of adult and children's services. And we share any information published by the Ombudsman with service areas to assist them. The complaint itself will later be reported to the leadership team and to Cabinet, and will include any views from the Governance and Audit Committee prior to the report being received by Cabinet. So I'll be grateful for any comments or recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your comprehensive report. And it's lovely to see that there are nice compliments in there as well. And I assume these are fed back to each member of the team that it's relevant to?
Yeah, with the compliments, they are sent in to us. So we ask the service areas then to submit them to us so that we can include it. So we ask heads of service just to remind staff members, if they do receive it. I know people don't always like to sing praises of themselves, but just to let us know, and we can include that, and obviously that feeds in then to the report as well as the complaints.
Yeah, that's very good, thank you. Right, we have some hands raised. Councillor Ashley, I think you were first.
Yeah, I was. I read this report with a lot of interest, to be honest. I think you've got something in there, was it yourself? So the bit about using a complaint as a positive. I like that in scrutiny, and I think it's really important that you highlighted the fact that it's not always a negative. A complaint is an opportunity to do better, and you've got it in there. It's brilliant. That's the other observation I like to make was, and it glares out at me. Well, obviously, the two areas that are complained about seem to be the most. I might have got this wrong. Well, obviously, one is neighbourhood services, because we get people moan about people rightly complain. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. Rightly complain about services because it's one of the biggest services we've got per population. We go to everybody on the collection of the bins and recycling, and obviously that's going to be most complained about if it's missed, and that's formal complaints. And then the other thing which I noted with some complain about complaining, so I thought that was interesting. The other thing that I have brought up with yourselves before is when an inquiry to a member is not a complaint, it's an inquiry, but when that goes to complaint, because I don't think we have a mechanism. That was a conversation I had before about all members get verbal complaints, which is an inquiry, comes to us, somebody has a conversation about something, we do something about it, but then people are not satisfied, they then go and complain. Do you actually record that something has come from a member? it'd be interesting to know about that, because we quite often do a lot of spade work, as it was, and it doesn't go to you. You obviously don't record that, but when it does, I wonder about that, because there's a lot of work that members do, and I praise members for doing this, that means they don't get complaints or they satisfy people, which is part of the same process that I've just been talking about. Be interested to hear your views on that.
Can you answer that one, please?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, as you said, complaints is a positive. I think it's just changing the perception of complaints, and what they are and what you can draw from them. So it's what you can learn, lessons that can come from them, and any improvements to the service area and what the service is being provided. Because if it's not resolved, obviously it'll just happen again, potentially. So it's identifying those. With regards to complaints from members, we do, not regularly, but often have complainants referred to us by members if there's something that they wish to then pursue that hasn't been resolved. So by all means, if you've been dealing with a member of the public and they remain dissatisfied, notify them of our position, our process. You can direct them to corporate complaints, and then we'll liaise with them directly then to deal with that through the appropriate process for them. We have had them come in from councillors, and the councillors asked to be copied into any then subsequent response. As long as the complainant's happy with that, then we can share that accordingly with their permission. Thank you.
No, thank you. But Chair, if I may just briefly come back. I mean, obviously, I'm ex-CAB and various other things in my past, so I don't particularly like to go through the process if I can resolve it. It's not what you're talking about is resolution, not complaint. So I tend not to go for it if I can help it, but no, I'm not actually gone to complain. But it's the resolution of problems as opposed to complaining about them, which I probably, as a member, I'm pretty clued up on. But that is that problem. Whether you resolve a problem or complain about it, it must be something you know acutely, I suspect.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't always resolve the issue at hand. We can only deal with it via the process and provide the answer that we're able to provide. So we're always looking at the process that's been followed, that whatever department has followed their procedures. So that's our focus then, as the department been acting in line with their policy or procedure when something's happened. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that answer. That's a good one.
Mr. Kelleher, your hand's raised.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just curious, in a way, just to clarify in my own mind. Early in the report, you talk about looks like a significant percentage increase in complaints over the past year from the previous year. But I'm looking carefully at the Appendix 3, the comparative table. Nonetheless, despite that increase, I think Torvine looks like it's doing really well in the comparisons along many of the indicators. So just as an observation, I'd say just, our thanks and congratulations on that.
Thank you, I'll second that.
Thank you for that. Yeah, they have gone up quite considerably. Like I said, we met with the Complaint Standard Authority last year just to discuss the way that we deal with the complaints or the contacts that were coming in. As Councillor Ashley was saying, a lot of the contacts we were receiving, we were dealing with at point of contact, able to resolve quickly. They'd be logged as another rather than a stage one. So what we had to look at was those contacts coming in, did they meet the threshold of a complaint? Looking at the definition of a complaint on our policy, were those actually a stage one complaint rather than an inquiry or a service issue? Because there are service issues that we get that aren't complaints that we're able to resolve, but some of those then, perhaps they're persistent missed collections, or there's something that needs to be looked at outside, not specifically for waste, but other issues. Even though we can resolve them quickly, they're still technically a complaint. So that's a lot of the increase that we've had is through that recategorisation as to how we log those and deal with them. Because we were still doing all of the work, we were still making the inquiries, giving them full responses, giving them the feedback. It's just where they were put on the log and where they counted them within our stats. And I think you see across the authorities that the numbers are going up and up across all authorities because more people are willing to complain. And I think there's that accessibility for them to come to the local authority and for their issues to be addressed, and rightly so. So I think it's not a bad thing that numbers are going up. Obviously, it's just dependent then on the outcomes and what we're able to achieve from those. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's very helpful, Chris, the explanation that's been given, because obviously the headline figure is a doubling of complaints and fewer people getting in touch. So that's helpful. A couple of questions in relation to some of that, really. Firstly, are you seeing a trend, if you like, in year? So obviously we know the councillors made a significant change around recycling, and that presumably will have generated a lot of complaints. That's my first point. And so do you think that's a sort of a point-in-time issue? And the second is, do you have, or are you seeing any serial complainants who complain regularly about many things? Because obviously a few people can boost numbers quite significantly. So it's really just that little bit of analysis in relation to that. And a very, very tiny point, and it's not looking to be pedantic, but you've mentioned 110 compliments in the beginning, and at 410 you said 111, so just for consistency.
Okay, oh, yeah, sorry, Councillor, yeah, I did note that. Sorry, apology. It was 110, sorry. For the serial complainants, we do have serial contacts where it's the same issue, potentially, and that's when we'd know that we'd have to escalate that. If it's the first time that they've contacted, it may just be a service issue. If they're then contacting the following week or 2 weeks later, then something's happened.
Yeah.
Whatever we've done that should have resolved it hasn't happened, so there's an issue then that needs to be looked into. We do have seasonal complaints. It depends what's happening, what the time of year is. If there's leaves come off the trees, then we might be having something about that. Grass cutting. If we're looking at that economy environment area, with the consultation, we did have a large number come to us around the actual consultation itself, which we had to log and deal with. So it can sometimes depend on what's happening within the borough, which prompts then an increase in numbers in that particular area.
If I may come back, I would just reiterate, actually, I think this sort of information, both in terms of complaints, type number and compliments, are very helpful for the council scrutiny process, and I would echo the comments that my colleagues have made. We find it really helpful to have that fed in.
Thank you. Mr. Rees, you've got a question?
Yeah, thank you again for all of this. It's, as others have said, it's very, very interesting. In your report, paragraph 3.4, you talk about 1,006 contacts which came through to your team, but they were outside of the complaints process. And you refer to a number of those as being quite complex matters. Is it that your team had to spend a great deal of time dealing with that, or was it passed on to other parts of the council to deal with? Is it that it was taking up your time, or others?
Yeah, so some of them we do get quite heavily involved with, so we'll liaise with service areas. So even if it isn't a complaint, it's an issue that, or an inquiry that we can deal with and try to resolve. So if they come to us, we do try to take ownership of it if there's something that needs a bit more intention, I suppose. If it's a simple service issue or inquiry, then we just pass it on to the relevant service area to address business as usual. There are times that we have things coming in that do require sort of cross-service inquiries, because it can cover different areas also. So we need input from different. We also cover the unacceptable actions, so we have certain residents that come via us as a contact point. So obviously then we're then managing those and coordinating, liaising with the relevant service area to be able to respond to them accordingly. So yeah, it's not the 1006. I think they come to us as a contact point. They know we're there. They may ring. They may not be able to get hold of somebody. It could just be that we then pass our message to them or direct them accordingly. But there are others then that I think for our own purpose that we just want to know that that's been resolved, and so we will take on ownership of that and deal with that accordingly.
Thanks. And then 4.3, where we're looking at the number of complaints upheld in the year, and you've got 84 corporate stage 1 complaints upheld, and roughly about half of that number again were not upheld. Forgive me if it is somewhere in the report and I've missed it, but is in those 84 that were upheld, is there a trend at all? Were they about a specific thing, service, or is it just completely random across the board? I was just struck that obviously 84 were upheld, so there was something at issue there. Thanks.
I've given them more of a breakdown in Appendix 1. I don't know if they've given all of the upheld and not upheld in there. I think the larger number comes from economy and environment. So I think those are the bigger numbers that we get by way of complaints, and they're the ones then persistent missed collection. If it's happened, it's happened. There isn't really much that we can say that it's not upheld. So I think they then sort of increase the numbers. What we're looking at then is that person coming back to us, or if not, then we know that that issue has been dealt with and resolved, and there shouldn't be any further concerns with that. So I think you do get it. We determine it based on the outcomes, what we're looking at as part of the investigation process. So we will then look at that on weighting and decide based on that, is it upheld, is it not? So I think there isn't necessarily a particular area that there's a concern with, but I think just because of the numbers, then it sits more with economy and environment than it does with others. But you may see percentage-wise across the different service areas that there may be, because of the lower numbers, still that similar percentage figure between those.
Just one last point about your ombudsman training. Great that that's all going ahead. I know that we as a committee have sat in on some sort of general training regarding, how the whole system works, and I wouldn't recommend that we get involved in the nitty-gritty, hands-on stuff, which perhaps the ombudsman training is. But if there is information that might benefit our knowledge as committee members from that training, I think it might be useful if you're able to pass it on, or if you feel that we should sit in on it, then we will do our best. Thanks.
No, that's great. I'm limited on numbers for this one session. We were meant to have 3, but unfortunately with a change in trainers, so we only got the one session available to us. So I've almost filled that, but I know they are willing to meet with councillors and hold separate sessions. So it's something that I can raise with Complaint Standards Authority, and just put it to him that you're interested in having that discussion and see if he's able to come along at some point and give the overview for yourselves.
Yeah,
because it gives you more of an idea of their expectations from the local authority also, and sort of their input with us and why we're doing what we're doing now by way of changing our recording and numbers, etc.
Okay, that would be good. Thank you. Mr. Kelleher, your hand's raised.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just a thought, really, just to reflect on some of the questions colleagues have put into the report. Just wondering, in the future, visually, it might be helpful for the committee if there are any trends and patterns officers do see within the figures, to present them in graph form, so we can see any trends and patterns quite more simply than we currently can in the format of the report. That's not meant to be a criticism, by the way. It's just to explore, maybe make the report more understanding for us lay people.
Thank you. Yeah, that's definitely. I can look to that going forward for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Williams.
Just a final observation, because I think it's useful, because it does appear that the areas where you have the most complaints also seem to be the areas where the most compliments are. So you've got 55 compliments in environment and economy. So clearly things are filtering through and behaviour change is happening. So I think that's really positive, just to acknowledge that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the important thing as well, is having those compliments coming through just to offset the complaint, because I think people are less likely to compliment than they are to complain.
Yeah.
So just to have those noted and for people to be aware of them, to know that people appreciate the work that's being done, then yeah, I agree.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ashley, you've got something brief to add to this?
I did scrutiny some time ago on things like the Welsh language provision, and I'm also thinking of social services. There's some areas of this which are different from missed bin collections, and that's a whole different area in some ways, because it's statutory provision that people think they might not be getting, as opposed to a service that we provide regularly. Do you sort of monitor that with colleagues in other areas? Because obviously the Welsh language was a particular one which we had a lot of problems with. Well, we don't have problems with, we have to do it's compliance to an all Wales provision, as opposed to things like bin collection. There's different subtleties about that, and you said, what about lessons learned? I find that fascinating, having done the not fascinating, it's part of what we do with cross scrutiny and that, and obviously it's somewhat different. It's compliance to things that we have to do, as opposed to day to day, and I wonder whether there's any lessons that we learn from that.
You mentioned the Welsh language compliance. Those are things that don't come through via us, because I know there's a separate process for those to be looked into. If we have Welsh language complaints in Welsh as such, but not about the actual standards and compliance necessarily. Where we do have those, obviously we liaise with Alan and discuss how best to approach those. The statutory processes that we deal with are the social care complaints processes, so it's more that the process itself is statutory in how we handle the complaint. And then we're looking, sort of that dictates then how that complaint investigation is undertaken, who does what, when they do it, within the specific timeframes around the services that are given by social services. So I suppose it's difficult if there is a statutory. It just depends on where the route is for that statutory process. If there is any kind of objection or complaint around that, if there's an appeals process, again, that sits outside of us because they have the right of appeal. So there's always that interaction with service areas just to make sure that the person is being dealt with in the appropriate way. And if it isn't that way, then we take on ownership of that, and then we would deal with it accordingly.
I mean, what you're saying is there's a judicial function in some of that, in others there isn't. Well, the ombudsman is a function very similar. No, that is much more involved, isn't it?
Yeah, so we need to look at the detail of the complaint. So
yeah,
it's always difficult when it comes in to immediately know what you're going to do with something. So oftentimes when you have something coming in that you've never dealt with before, it takes a lot of conversations with the relevant service areas to know what route is the best route to be taking, and to make sure that you're dealing with that appropriately and effectively for them.
Thank you there. That's good.
Thank you for that. Councillor Williams.
It's really, I think on behalf of this committee, we should note on page 199 that it was the joint fewest complaints that went to the Ombudsman and the lowest proportion. So I think that's worthy of note and should be recognised by this committee.
Quite agree with that. And on that note, as we've got no more hands raised, members, the recommendations are on page 188 of the agenda. Please can you state whether you're against the recommendations or wish to abstain, otherwise we will take this report as being agreed.
Aye, for good report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent report, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 10, the Internal Audit Operation Plan Quarterly Update. Peter Williams, will you, Head of Audit, please could you present your report for us?
Thank you, Chair. Morning all. Update on our internal audit plan for 2022-23. In terms of the key messages on page 100 and something, 209 even. Progress of the plan is going well to date in terms of our achievement against our target. We've currently achieved 37% against the target of 75% for the overall plan. And as you know, within that plan, there are core elements of the plan, which are the major financial systems, about 12 in total, and we are on target with that, with 41% achieved out of the 100%. Of the audits we completed in the year, there's no real significant issues I want to bring to your attention. We've had no high priority recommendations. In terms of some issues I just will mention, paragraph 42 on page 110, I mentioned that progress is going well. It refers to the appendix at the back on page 210, I think it is. Sorry, 215, 216. Some of the jobs there just bring to your attention. No high priorities recommendations. There were 2 follow-ups we carried out where there was limited progress, and I continue to monitor those and report back if necessary. One was on community halls and one was on equipment and adaptation. I think there are issues around resourcing in those particular areas which would contribute to the lack of progress, but no high recommendations in it. Cumberland High School is another one where it's probably one of the only opinions that's limited so far this year. When we carry out school audits, we have a base core programme of the areas we always want to cover, and we offer additional bits they want to undertake. And I think there's been some changes to staff in Cumberland High School recently, so they were keen for us to do a lot more of the work, so they identify all the issues, get all the issues on the table, for want of a better word. Therefore, we've done the first part of the audit, and like I said, the areas we looked at were limited. There's another audit plan for December when we do the bits they requested us to do. Hopefully that will be better than limited, but following both those, next year, probably in the summer, we will carry out a follow-up audit of both audits to make sure the agreed recommendation on both would have been implemented. Other than that, I don't think there's anything else I need to bring to your attention, and pleased to answer any questions you may have on the report.
Thank you, Peter. Have we got any questions with regards to this report, please?
It's just the observation, Chair, that seems to be good progress, and it's helpful to note the summary that you've given.
Thank you. Right, so no other questions or queries. Members' recommendations are on page 213 of the agenda. Please could you state if you're against the recommendations or wish to abstain, otherwise I'll take this report as being agreed. You're all happy, thank you. Agenda item 11 is the Audit Committee Programme. This report's been included for information only. Peter, Head of Internal Audit and Procurement, may wish to make a comment.
No, that's the ongoing plan. I think that most of the reports we'd expect we've received. I think the only one that didn't come to this committee was an update from external audit around their performance programme, which we'll have at the next committee.
Any questions or queries with regard to that? No, lovely. Moving on to agenda item 12, which is the date of the next meeting. The next meeting will be held on the 17th of January here in the Civic Centre. Right, thank everybody for their attendance and contributions. Thank you for all the reports. There's a lot of hard work gone into them, and they've all been very good, and thank you for all the questions that you've answered. I'll now close the meeting. Thank you.